As a parent, you have to understand that everything is a potential lesson. Most importantly, you need to remember that your child is unique. The way in which you challenge them should be as well. In this video, I'm going to share 2 stories of things I did to challenge my son on his journey to becoming an ICD adult, an independent, confident, good decision maker. These 2 examples worked great for my son. Maybe they'll work for your child, maybe not. That's a decision you have to make as the parent. As long as you put your child's best interests first, you'll be fine, and they'll be fine. There'll probably be a few parents that find this first story a bit disconcerting. There may be a few who honestly believe I was wrong, very wrong. But preparing your child for an ICD life is about teaching them to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That one skill is so critically important for every child to master. You can't wait until your child is a teenager to begin the being comfortable with being uncomfortable training. Read Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. It's an uncomfortable read in many ways, but I think that was part of his point. It's only by being uncomfortable, living at the boundaries of our abilities, that we truly get the most out of life. My son learned about being uncomfortable at an early age. I believe those early lessons eventually led him to accomplish things by 16 years old that most people couldn't do that were twice that age. It doesn't matter if you hate the following story or love it. Please think about what I was doing and why. I've already had a video about bullying, but I'm going to reference that here again to make a point. Stick with me, it should become clear what I'm trying to do. The concept of bully prevention has become very big in the last 10 plus years, but I don't think most people can articulate the difference between bullying and character development. In my opinion, simply put, if I behave in a seemingly cruel manner towards someone and I do it for my own amusement, it's bullying. If I engage in the same behavior, but it's for the benefit of the person being teased, then it's character development. The concept is very easy to understand when seen through the eyes of an enlistee going through military boot camp. I personally have never been a member of the armed services. I've never served. My knowledge comes from reading numerous biographies of soldiers fighting in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. Most of those books have at least one chapter on the author's experience in boot camp. Every one of those boot camp chapters starts and ends the same way. The start: I hate my drill instructor. He is a sadistic, cruel devil put on this earth to abuse me. The end: I love my drill instructor. He has put forth every effort to teach me what I need to know to survive as a soldier in combat. If you know anyone that has ever served in a combat zone, ask them about their time as a boot. Drill instructors are not bullies. They know that every step of the process they put their recruits through is vitally important in preparing them to survive in combat. Drill instructors do not behave the way they do for their own amusement. They challenge their boots in the way they do to increase the odds that those recruits return to their families after serving. That is, they survive. My first story is not about me being cruel to my son. It's about me going through a process to teach him to deal with learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I've mentioned this in previous videos. I did this for him, not for my amusement. One of the first ways I began to teach my son to learn to become comfortable with being uncomfortable was in a Target store. At the time, my son was around 3 years old. Like most kids that age, he was very mobile and had a tendency to only hear what he wanted to hear. Translation: he didn't listen to me. When he would wander away, I would not always use the zoo approach that I mentioned in an earlier video, the 3 times and you are out and we go home system. We were at Target for me. Unlike a play date, zoo, or some fun time outing, I had things I needed to do. I could not instantly leave, as that would defeat the entire purpose of me being there in the first place. Let me briefly take 2 steps back. When your child begins to walk, you need to explain to them that wandering away could result in them getting lost. Being separated from mom or dad is a bad thing for everyone concerned. I have seen some parents leash their children. I find that approach a little off-putting. In my opinion, it's lazy and counterproductive. Unless you have a special needs child, leashing is preposterous in my opinion. Your child is not a mule pulling a wagon or a dog out for a walk. Your child needs to learn to pay attention. They need to follow some basic rules for their own safety, and they need to understand the age-appropriate behavior in different places you visit. Safety was my main concern. I explained to my son what he should do if he got lost and could not find me. The explanation was not my idea. I was still a rather new dad and a thick-headed male to boot, so it was not surprising that I didn't know what to tell him. But my wife did. A mom with kids. My wife explained to me and to our son that if you ever get lost, find a mom with kids. She will help you. I said to her, "Are you sure?" Of course, she rolled her eyes at me. It made perfect sense. What mom would ignore a small child asking for help? Now, back to my Target story. I told my son not to wander off. I told him to please keep me in sight. He wandered away from me once. I reminded him, "Stay close." He didn't listen, but boy was he sorry. The second time he wandered off, I hid. I found a rack of clothes that allowed me to hide, keeping him from seeing me, but I could see him. It didn't take long for him to realize I was gone. The look on his face was difficult for me to deal with, but it was priceless. He began to cry. I let him suffer for just a little bit before I made my miraculous reappearance. "What's the matter?" I asked. "I couldn't find you," he said. "Did you wander off?" He gave me that classic timid, guilty look. I specifically chose department stores like Target to teach him this lesson. Lots of room, many places to hide, and plenty of moms with kids. I believe it only took 3 or 4 times until he figured it out. Not that I was hiding from him, but what my wife had told the both of us. The first time he couldn't find me and instantly began looking for a mom with kids, I cried. I watched him approach a woman. I saw him telling her his problem. She frowned at him, but stopped what she was doing and started walking with him to the front of the store. I'm confident that if I let them, I would have eventually heard an announcement on the PA system calling me to the front of the store. I didn't let it get that far. After they had walked an aisle or two, I reappeared. I thanked the mom for helping, and I walked off with my son. I didn't yell at him. I just reminded him to keep his eyes on me when we were out. It didn't matter where we were, a park, a playground, a store. Always know where your mom or dad is. I swear there was a little sparkle in his eye as I congratulated him for doing the right thing, finding a mom with kids. I congratulated him for remembering what to do in that uncomfortable situation. That was a lesson learned, a big, huge, important lesson. Was I being abusive or somehow bullying my son for setting him up like that? Absolutely not. Lessons learned the hard way are lessons that are remembered. I didn't hide from him and scare him to amuse myself. I did it to teach him something valuable, something that could possibly save his life someday. If you think that's overly dramatic, do a little research on lost children in this country. It's scary stuff. Your job as a parent is to teach your child how to take care of themselves, how to recognize something dangerous from something safe. There are all kinds of things you can do to scare your kids straight. I used a very safe, controlled method to teach my son that lesson. I was able to put him in an uncomfortable predicament, and he learned to think straight and make a good decision in that uncomfortable situation. You can't always be there to protect your kids. Figure out different ways to teach them to take care of themselves. They'll have to in the long run. Now, story 2. When my son was 3 or 4 years old, I took a trip to Stone Mountain Park. Stone Mountain is about 30 minutes east of downtown Atlanta, Georgia. Stone Mountain is famous for the gigantic rock that is the centerpiece of the park, hence the name Stone Mountain. There's a trail there called Walk Up Trail. It starts at the base of the mountain and ends at the summit. The trail is about 1 mile long, has approximately 700 plus feet of elevation. The average person can walk 1 mile in around 15 minutes, give or take. The average person takes 45 minutes to walk up Stone Mountain. My son and I had gone to Stone Mountain one day to walk to the summit. I wasn't sure how our day would go. It was only 3 or 4 at the time. I was hoping my fun-loving, adventurous son would be with me that day, not the moody, whining child that occasionally showed up for adventures together. I parked my truck, we walked to the trailhead to get a look at what awaited us. I had done this trail previously with my wife, so I knew exactly what we were in for. My son was in awe of the mountain. It showed on his face. That was a good way to start. Most people don't walk straight up the trail to the summit. There's a small pavilion about a third of the way up the mountain, and of course there are many places to sit and get relatively spectacular views of Atlanta along the way up. We began our walk in good spirits. Unfortunately, before we had even reached the pavilion, a third of the way there, perhaps only about a quarter of the trail behind us, my son decided the trail was too difficult. Whining and complaining ensued. As the parent of a 3-plus-year-old, that was not behavior that surprised me. I was a little bummed since we hadn't gone that far, but I was definitely not shocked. We had already passed several people. Like my son had decided, like them, my son had decided the trail was too tough. If you ever do this walk, you'll see many people stop and take breaks along the trail. Nothing wrong with that. It's a relatively steep trail and exhausts all but those in the best shape. My son sat stubbornly on a rock and refused to go any further. This was one of those moments every parent experiences repeatedly throughout their active parenting years, 0 to 18. How should I handle this? I smiled at my son and agreed that he should sit on the rock and wait for my return. I explained to him that we had come to the park to walk to the top of the mountain. I told him that if he was not up to it, that was fine. I would see him on my way back down. He gives me this weird, confused look as I turn around and start to walk away. More whining and complaining. I turned back to him once again. I told him, hey, rest, wait for me. I began to walk up the mountain, but at a pretty slow pace. I don't know what went through his head at that moment. When I asked him years later about this, he didn't remember it. He may not ever consciously remember, but I believe it's buried in his subconscious somewhere. Because ultimately, he got up and followed me. I believe the main reason he decided to follow me was because he knew I would leave him there, or at least he believed I would. There was plenty of people around, and he was never the type of kid to just run off and disappear. My plan was to get out of sight and then watch to see what he would do, just like I did at the Target store. If he followed, I would hurry a bit ahead and then pretend to be tying my shoe or some other nonsense. Fortunately, I didn't need to do anything like that. My consistent parental approach since he was just a baby was paying off. I walked probably less than 50 yards when I glanced down and he was at my side walking up the mountain. He had caught up to me and was determined to walk to the top. I never said much on the way up, maybe a check that out or look at the view kind of thing. My favorite part of that day was when we passed an older couple within literally a stone's throw of the summit. We were really close to the top. The wife was standing, trying to encourage her clearly overweight husband to get up. He was sitting and panting on the side of the trail. The wife noticed me and my son and stated loudly, you dragged me out here today and now you can't even make it to the top. Look at that little kid. He's doing it. He's doing it without any problem. Now, I'm not sure if my son picked up the pace because he heard what she had said or because we were so close to the top. For whatever reason, he found a burst of energy and we were rewarded with a view 360 degrees from the top of Stone Mountain. It's pretty good stuff up there. Don't ever believe someone that tells you your 3, 4, or 5-year-old can't be challenged physically, mentally, and emotionally. They absolutely can. It's your job to figure out how. This is all life really is. It's an endless series of physical, mental, and emotional challenges. The earlier you start challenging your child in this way, the better prepared they will be for a life filled with those challenges. The sooner you begin building the 3 core strengths, the sooner they will begin developing those strengths and the better prepared they'll be to take on adversity as an adult. An independent, confident, good decision maker. They're not born, they're built. What too many parents don't grasp is that it's not their job to prepare their child for the good times in life. It's their job to prepare them for the bad times. Your job as a parent is to do everything in your power to build that ICD adult so that their life is not filled with whining and complaining about things they can't accomplish, but the satisfaction and joy they get from the things they do accomplish. Thanks for listening.